everybody in TV land. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Boss Update. Today joining me is Tom Bramer. Welcome, Tom.
Good morning.
Good morning. And today we're going to talk about our next big event, which is the Winter Feast. Winter Feast is on February 17th at the Nekoosa Area Senior Center. It's a great location for this event. It's on February 17th from 4 to 8 p.m. Gathering time is about 4 o'clock. We got some hot apple cider, some sausage, some cheese, and different things like that you can snack on, and you gather around and talk a little bit and visit. And at 4:50 we get you seated, and then at 5 o'clock we start and progress into the eating. We'll have a little vignette before, and hopefully a little vignette maybe afterwards, some 3-4 minutes. So that'll be, some of our members are going to do something like that, and it kind of adds a little vintageness to our program and everything. Now, what we're doing, the Winter Feast for, is first of all, of course, it's a fundraiser.
Absolutely.
And I mean it both ways, F-U-N-D and F-U-N. It's a lot of fun for us people that participate in it and help prepare things, though by Saturday night we're maybe getting a little tired. But it's a lot of fun, and the evening goes very fast. It's the fastest 4 hours in the history, really, because when you start at 4 o'clock and by the time you're done at 8, you wondered where you thought it was 2 hours.
Yeah.
2 hours long. So it's a great evening. We get great food, and Tom's going to talk about that in a second. We have great entertainment. We have an 8-piece string band and everything. They're going to play really period appropriate, if nothing else, maybe a little bit before our period, but old is good. As you can see, Tom and I here, old is good. And we have to apologize a little bit. We look a little pale today. Wisconsin Rapids City decided not to cut out the makeup artists here before this, so we don't have any makeup artists. We look a little paler than usual, but no,
It could be that it's into January. You know?
It may be January. So Wakely's Winter Feast, February 17th. Tickets, Family Natural Foods, and at Beaver's Variety Store in Nekoosa, and at Country Freckles, just south of Burger King. Tickets are $20 for a person participating and $25 at the door. We suggest, last year Tom had said something this morning, I heard we had served 174 people. Capacity is 200. So we suggest you get your tickets early, and then you don't have to worry about it. You got a place to sit and everything else like that. So it's going to be a great evening. Tom, a little bit about menu. What do we got going?
Well, we'll start out with chicken and ham, which are our domestic meats. We're going to do dressing, mashed potatoes with gravy. We're going to do some beaver meatballs.
Beaver?
Beaver.
Yeah, that's not domestic, of course.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
What
are you going to put them in or serve them?
Do like excuse me, like an Italian meatball.
Okay. And
Not
you
with
have
the
pasta with it?
No, just the sauce.
Okay.
And the Italian meatball. We're going to do a small game chicken a la king. That should be with squirrel and rabbit on a bacon powder biscuit.
Okay, sounds delicious.
We're going to do venison Swiss steak, which has been we've done that a number of times in the past. It's always gone real well. We've come up with a new recipe. I'm going to talk with our chefs tonight. We meet for the final
go through.
Yep. But we're going to try some. I would like to try some venison braised in ale.
Oh, wow.
One of the people that makes the historic clothing that we have also runs a YouTube cooking channel for historic recipes.
And quite extensive, in my understanding.
Very. And he just did one of beef braised in ale. Now, he used a piece of steak, regular size. Kind of pounded it out, so it's, the kind of thing. And but as I watched John do that, I'm going, so we have venison that's cut in small chunks, bite-sized pieces. So why couldn't we braise that in ale with the onions and whatever, son of a
broth or gravy?
Yeah,
with it?
Kind of a gravy with it. We used to get that at home an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I thought, now, gall darn it, with the ale and the onion, and there's some other spices in there.
And I'll supply
Sounds
the
good.
ale, Tom.
You will, good.
Yeah.
I need a couple of them.
Okay.
We're going to do slow roasted rabbit also. Maybe not with the ale, but kind of along that same line. But rabbit is another one. Any of the wild game, you either got to serve them not very well done at all, and rabbit you wouldn't want to eat that way.
Right.
But that or they need to cook them done. And so we're going to try, I've got a real nice recipe for slow roasted rabbit. And we're going to do it smaller pieces of cut up rabbit, much like we do the chicken.
Yeah, that's kind of a play on words. A slow roasted rabbit. Normally we think of the tortoise as being slow and the rabbit being quick.
Actually, it's because the rabbit was a little slow. He ended up getting roasted. Yes. We're also. That's enough of that.
Tom's recovering from some of this stuff that all you folks are going through. So
Yes. We're going to do some corn. We're going to do roasted root vegetables.
that went over really well.
Really well last year. We're going to try adding some sweet potato in there as it's a root vegetable.
What
of
we're
course.
talking about parsnip, rutabaga, sweet
Turnips,
sweet potato
onions,
this
sweet
year.
potatoes, that sort of roasted, nice caramelized in the oven. They went real well last year, and I'm sure it'll be really good again. We're going to do sauerkraut, which we made, or Jim Giese and his friends made at our at our fall fair. So it was made on the site. So it's one of our own. We're doing homemade squash. We had a member that donated some, so we're going to do squash. We're going to do baked beans, and a good deal of the beans that we're going to use were grown in our historic garden on the site last summer. We're doing coleslaw, we're doing pickles and veggie sticks, that's sort of the relishy sort of thing.
What will we be looking at on desserts? I know a lot of the participants in the past have enjoyed our dessert menu.
We're doing bread pudding and cran-apple crisp.
Oh boy.
We're not exactly sure. We do several kinds of bread pudding. We've done some with cranberries, some with raisins, some with apples. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to work that out. That comes tonight at the meeting.
Yes.
But we'll have at least 2 desserts. There'll be bread and butter, certainly, and milk and water and coffee for beverage. And there'll be plenty of things to choose from. The list is a little long, but some of like the beaver meatballs, while there'll be plenty for everybody to have some,
You got 8 pounds.
we got 8 pounds. We're going to stretch it some because we'll add pork sausage because it's such a
Right.
lean meat like all the rest of the games. So, but, 10, 12 pounds of meatballs, it sounds like a lot until you get a room full of people. Then it looks smaller.
Will you do, Tom, the meatballs like we did last year? We had a member that made some meatballs and we served it as a kind of an hors d'oeuvre
Yep.
before. Will you do that with it, or is that up in the air yet?
We're going to do them as the dinner,
As a
in
dinner
a dinner
part.
part, rather than beforehand. We've got too much meat to do it that way, but not enough to make it the star of the show.
Right.
So we're kind of doing, and it's a good way, I think, people that are not terribly experimental with wild game.
Excuse me.
The Italian meatball with the pork sausage and then the homemade spaghetti sauce, which is one of the members is making. It's a good way to introduce some people to wild game.
Well, and the benefit for all you folks listening, the wild game, all the recipes are marked,
Yep.
so you know exactly what you're
Yep.
eating or not eating, and you can pick and choose what you like. And we suggest to bring a hearty appetite because we suggest after everyone's been fed, if anybody wants to go back for a second, go back and help yourself. We really don't want to take it home. We've been looking at it for 2 or 3 days. And probably just as soon that you take it home and in your stomachs and that sort of thing and enjoy it.
Yep.
Tom, you want to talk a little bit about our musical group and the contra dancing?
Right. The musical group is called Strings on the Prairie, and they're a group from
Westby?
Westby area down towards La Crosse. They are historic reenactors that do music. That's their kind of
And that's really how we found out about
Right.
it, wasn't it?
right. They were at they were at the historic event last year in October. They were at 2 years anyway, and then they were at our summer event also. And that's where we really got to hear them. And so many of us said we got to have them back, and they really do a nice job. It's quite a large group. I was surprised. I thought
3 or 4 or 5
4 would be,
Yes.
I'd be glad to get that many. But the gal said that they've been getting together at practice, and had a real good work through this last Sunday.
Okay.
So that they're ready to go. And one of their people will call the contra dancing, usually from about 7:30
to 8.
to about 8 o'clock. We do that, and they're going to do that. And they do this for other historic groups in the same, not exactly the same as we do, but kind of thing. So they know what they're doing, and they'll be able to lead us through it.
Yeah, and we suggest if any of you folks would like to dance, to come on out and dance. Many of us citizens will be out there dancing, and we kind of walk through it so you know what's going on. And usually there's a lead couple, and then the other ones follow. So by the time your turn comes up, if you're 4 or 5 down, you'll know exactly what to do. So it's a good opportunity to do that. I like it that the group plays the period music. In the past, we've had some very good groups, but they really didn't play the period music, so we had to have a recording or something like that. So this is an added bonus this year for us.
Right.
So that'll be a good opportunity. So sounds like a great menu, Tom. You and your cooks will get together, 3 or 4 of you tonight, and kind of go through this and hash it out. Maybe a little refinement, but that's your basic ingredients there.
We may scratch one or the other just because of being able to get it all done in time. But I would like, because we have the stuff available, people donate the meat, and you want to use it.
Yes.
I mean, it's, and by the way, our wild game, we can serve it, and we have a license from the DNR to do that. We have to apply each time we serve wild game, and they've been really, really good about allowing us to do this and working between us. And they also notify the health department so that everybody knows what's going on, and it's all above board and everything's ready.
Tom, why don't you touch on a little bit? Some people may ask the question in their mind, there's no wild fowl in there. Why don't you touch on that wild fowl thing? Because that's been, some people say, well, can I donate something like that to you? And you really can't take wild fowl.
In fact, a number of years ago we did, but the federal regulations have changed. And because they're a migratory bird, they could come from other states or from Canada. And it's not that they're worried about diseases or anything. It's that the federal says you cannot sell wild game, period. Wisconsin has the same type of law, but they make an exception for nonprofits that are doing it to raise money for whatever, the sportsman's club, the church, the whatever, a group like ours, a historic group, can apply for an exception. And that's what we have.
Right, and also I think with the fowl, they migrate, so they go across state lines.
That's where the federal comes in, because you need a federal and a state tax or a duck stamp to hunt them. The federal regulation supersedes, and
states.
It's nothing to do with disease or with anything else. It's just that regulation, and we can't get an exception from them as easily as we can get one from the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah. So that's a little answer, because you might question, well, they've got beaver there, and they've got rabbit, and they've got venison, but why don't they have something like ducks or
we used to do geese
or something like that?
We did a goose and gravy, not so different than some of the other things we do, but that was back a number of years ago, and the regulations from the federal have changed.
Yeah. So you heard the great menu we're having, and the music and everything else that's going on. So Historic Point Boss is putting on Winter Feast, and what we're doing is trying to emulate what Robert Wakely did at his inn in the 1850s, because he was creating this, what we call a cotillion in the Wakely's day, which was kind of a dance and feed and overnight and beverages and that sort of thing. And newspaper accounts record very heartily about how the great time people had at Wakely's Cotillion. This is, like cabin fever, like you and I get in February or March. It's gray outside, it's snowing, it's cold. You're ready to step out and have some fun. This is the place for it, folks. This is a great time, and I shouldn't say, but it's a great cause. At least I believe that because I've been involved with it for many years, and so it's a good time to come out with friends. Talk to some other family members or some other couples maybe that you know, and get yourself a whole table. We suggest that. In past years, we've had even businesses that were celebrating maybe their Christmas party later because of the busyness around Christmas time. They booked a whole table or two, and they had their Christmas party right at our festival, our winter feast. So it's a great opportunity to do something like that if you choose to do that. So a great time, February 17th, the Nakusa Area Senior Community Center, a great facility in Nakusa, Wisconsin, February 17th from 4 to 8 p.m. Tickets are $20.
And if you're not familiar where the senior center is,
Look for the
you turn the
signs.
ticket over, and there's a map on the back.
Yeah, and plus we'll have signage
Oh, yes.
up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have some signage with arrows on it and that sort of thing, so it'll be easy for you to find. And if you're coming in at 4 o'clock, it's going to be pretty light yet at 4 o'clock, so it'll be easy to see things. But great facility. We appreciate Dan Schmidt and all the folks at Nakusa that made this facility available to us, and I think it's a great site, great kitchen. I think that people enjoy the kitchen and everything like that. So February 17th, Wakely's Winter Feast, 4 to 8 p.m. Tickets $20. You can get them at Family Natural Foods, 9th and West Grand in Wisconsin Rapids, Country Freckles on 8th Street South, just south of Burger King, and at Beavers in Nakusa on Market Street. Tickets are available at all those locations, or if you know a member, they probably got tickets, or they can get tickets and get them to you. So we hope you can enjoy that evening with us, and we look forward to seeing you that evening. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
And now we got a little information about our ice cutting. This past Sunday, January 28th, we had our Wakely's Ice Harvest at Nepco Lake. Part of the bigger event, which is the Port Edwards Lions Fishery, which was a great event and a nice turnout. And I was amazed because the temperature was almost perfect. 25 degrees and no wind is almost like heaven on earth, because we've been in days when it's been below zero, and we've been in days when it's 40 degrees and it's too warm. But we had our annual ice harvest there, which we save and use on site during our summer events and everything for cooling drinks and making ice cream. We chop it up and grind it and use it for making ice cream and everything. Tom, I got there a little late. I came in on the more about halfway through. Can you talk about the early part of it, the ice harvest?
Well, we were early in January. A crew went out. We fenced off a 25 by 25 foot chunk of Nepco Lake, and the idea was that to keep cars, ATVs, snowmobiles from running over the top. The smoother the top of it is, the easier it is for us to stack. So then we showed up 9:30-ish on Sunday morning. One of the members brought an ice auger, and we bored holes on two sides. And then with our antique ice saws, we were able to cut out, I would imagine, 60 blocks out of the ice. It was close to 20 inches thick, if not 20 inches thick. It was really nice, smooth ice.
Just had to trim off what was about 2.5, 3 inches on top.
Because of the warm weather we had, when you get that January thaw, and normally we have to do that too.
Yes.
You'll get some on top that's not quite as crystal clear as the other, and it doesn't last as long. So we cut that off right away. We took it by truck down to our ice house at Nakusa, and then you and Don pretty much.
And Jim Nickels.
Yeah, Jim. And the three of you guys kind of worked inside the house, and the rest of us moved it into
back and forth,
and got it up in on the into the ice house so we could put it away.
I know that Jim Nickels and Don Matthews were doggone slave drivers, because I came down there I came down there about 1:45, and I thought, well, about this time they're just, stacking it up, and they said, hey, we need more ice. So
We had to go back
we
and
hadn't
cut.
brought back enough ice, so I went down to the Nepco Lake, and we started cutting again, and think we actually finished on the ice around just before 3 and cut some more blocks, and I'd say we have a mass as big as we've ever had in there.
at least.
And we know the last couple days we've been finished putting the sawdust in there, and 2 full trailers full and about 1/3 of the trailer of sawdust in there. And we didn't use quite as much sawdust this year because we had a greater mass of ice, so you don't have as much to cover. And we put it up. I was up on top
jeepers.
yesterday, and we put it up over the rafters, the sawdust. So there's a lot of sawdust in there.
Oh.
And we should have a good supply, I would say, all the way into probably August of ice. So it'll be good. And the Jim and Don did a great job on those base 2 layers. They were just flat as a pancake. You could have put a level on there, I think, and it would have come out the bubble right on spot where it should have been. So it was a good ice harvest. I always count it good if nobody falls in.
Yep.
Not even a soaker there. And then we had quite a few public come and help us. I know when I was out there on the later shift, Paul Westergaard came by, and a couple others came by and helped us cut ice and trim the ice and everything. John come and helped trim the ice. And it worked out really well because there was enough to go around, so nobody got overly exhausted on it, though we got tired by the end of the day, certainly. And you could tell a little bit we were tired because we put in 1 trailer full of sawdust, and then we decided to wait till Tuesday to finish off the sawdust, in which we did yesterday. It was a nice weather to do it in, and not any wind to blow or anything like that. So we got a great ice harvest, and we're going to use it, utilize it, and certainly that's what the Wakeleys would have done. They would have harvested ice. We don't know for sure if it would have been on the river or the creek, probably the river, but we don't do it for the public on the river just because the thicknesses might be variable, and we don't want anybody to fall in the river because, with the current and everything, you may have issues, and the liability is too great for that. So we do it at the Port Edwards Lions Fishery on Nepco Lake, and it's a great event. They do great work in the community, and this just adds a little more color to their event. So I think it was a great success. And by the way, Tom, thanks for being here today, and for your public, you watch a little bit of the actual ice harvest now. So enjoy.
This is the very beginning of ice harvesting. It starts about 3 weeks before we cut blocks. We come out on Lake Nepco, clean the snow off. The snow is cleaned off mainly so the ice can get thicker in that area. This year we didn't have that much snow, but in years past we've had to periodically go out and shovel snow for the first 3 weeks. This is about 3 weeks before we cut ice, so we can make sure that the ice is thick enough and control that the snow is off. And also, it's for the future. This fence that we put up is very pertinent to our day of ice cutting, because when we're done cutting ice, we have a hole in the ice approximately 10 by 8 where if it was it would almost be possible for a vehicle to even just drop right in. But mainly we're concerned about snowmobiles crossing the lake and falling in. So putting up this fence is done ahead of time. It probably wouldn't have to be, but mainly it protects us so that the ice is they don't get the tracks from the snowmobiles and the cars, and it just protects the ice so we have good quality ice for our ice cutting. This is the day of the ice harvest. The first thing we need to do is to drill some holes to get our saws started. We drill these holes approximately the size of the ice blocks we want. So if you see there's a hole approximately 12, 14 inches apart, and we drill along a line on one side of the hole, and then if you notice where Tom is, the man with the shovel, we will be drilling holes along that side also. So we basically have two lines of a square, and you start sawing into each hole, and as you see as the video continues here, when we start sawing, you'll see where we start sawing and we go through the first hole and then start cutting the other way too, because you need to have enough room so you don't knock into somebody else using the saw. So as this progresses, you'll be able to see that. Now this shows starting the hole. The hole is not that much larger than the saw, so you have to start the saw almost vertical and just start very slowly. And you also have to line up the saw, because if at this point, if you don't line up the saw, you could go way off to one side. So it's very important to get a good start here. And also, at this point, we have a good start, we're lined up, and now you can see the different actions of the saw. Back when people used to saw all day, different muscles would get sore. And you see the man in the picture here, he's bringing, at some point, he brings the saw way up. And that's one type of action. If you see him sawing in another action where he kind of bends over and has a shorter stroke, that is basically so you use different muscles so you can keep going all day. That saw should very seldom stop, only to reposition itself. If you can put yourself in that position, that man was either paid per block or paid by the hour to saw, or they were volunteers and wanted to get the job done. So we wanted to keep going. Here's now where you can see where it's very important. You have two saws at the same time. The first man started sawing, and when he got approximately about 3 feet sawed, then the man can come from the other way, so then the saws don't collide with each other. And also, at this point, you have to be aware not to saw too far one way, because if you saw too far one way, that you have to stand on that ice. And if it has a kerf, if it's sawed through on both sides, it could possibly break off, and you could have an accident where people would fall in. So when you watch this video, you'll see people sawing only so far and then stopping. That's because you have to keep that ice intact where you stand on. Also too, you can see now the accentuated action of the man bringing the saw way up and down. So that's one way of sawing. So you can saw that way for a while, and then when you get tired of that, when your muscles get tired of that, then see, now you change the action. The action goes down. You saw it just for a little while, but basically, if he was going to continue there, he would have just saw it in that lower action to use different muscles. And now we're positioning, starting out a hole the other way. See how you have to, it takes a lot of care to start that new hole. And also too, you know, now we're trying to work with 3 people, and you have to be very aware of where everybody else is. Right now, I just asked the other man to give me some room so I could start. So now we can get 3 people going. I just had to get my hole lined up so I was sawing in the right direction. Because it's very important, because you'll see later when we stack the ice in the ice house that the more square the blocks are, the easier it is to have a good solid pile. So that's very important to get lined up. You can actually see where the man on the left, we had to stop him from sawing because he was sawing too far that way. So we had to correct him so we didn't get too far, so people that could break off. Because the man sawing there now, if he stepped on that ice between the 2 curves, it could possibly break off. And now you see a good picture of starting in a hole. See, it's really difficult to get that first started, but once you get it started and get the saw all the way down, you know, then you can make some progress. All right, now he's lining up. He's looking around to make sure that he's going in the right direction. And pretty soon we'll be showing taking a block out. You see that one block there that's bobbing up and down, that will be the first block we take out. And it's really important to get the ice bobbing up and down even after this, because what it does is the bobbing up and down helps get the block up in the air, and it's a lot easier to get out. The ice was approximately about 20 inches thick, but if you notice the block, there's a white area on top of the block. That is where the ice has been thawing and refreezing and thawing and refreezing. As the video continues, you'll see people sawing that section off. And that's one thing where if you have young children that want to get involved in working out in this, it's very popular with the younger set to cut that white section off. There are little saws that, and also too, you see here where another man anchored the man pulling the block out, because we have had problems in the past where someone would basically be in danger of falling in the water, and basically they would let the ice chunk and the tongs go, and we really haven't lost a person. It was close one time last year, but we also usually just lose tongs. Now you can see the white part very clearly on top of that block, and Jim is moving it over to the area outside the fence where we have other people sawing that white chunk off. Now the big long saws do not work for that at all. We have other saws approximately about 3 feet long that you can saw the white off and cut the blocks if the blocks would happen to be too thick. I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the ice was 28 inches thick, and the blocks were taken out and cut in half for length, because it's just too large of a block to work with. So now you see and you don't really have to saw the block completely down. If you saw ice about halfway down, you can use a spud, basically a wedged tool, like an ice scraper, and you put it in the kerf, and if the ice is formed well, it will break off quite nicely and square. In the past, see, here's another block coming out, and people anchored, and that'll be taken away. So you produce ice quite fast at this point, with 2 or 3 people cutting, and you have enough people. We're always looking for more people, more the merrier, more hands, less work for everyone, and you'll see there. Now this is out there is where a lot of the young people and people that are new to ice cutting come and help, and they saw the chunk off, and they get to see the ice. And if you bring your children out there, we will help them and guide them, and it really seems to be a very enjoyable experience for most of the children, that the young people that we have experienced. They really enjoy this. So you can see, you just saw it just beyond the white, and takes a little bit to get started. But once you get started, it saws quite fast, really. So it's a lot of fun. I personally, when I first started cutting ice, this is one of the first things I've done, and it was really satisfying to cut it through and then chip it and watch it break off cleanly like that. There is a demonstration we do out to Wakely during the summer, because during ice cutting in the past, they used to use an ice plow, and it was like a plow that was about 3/4 of an inch thick and about 1 foot high and about 6 foot long, and it had segmented plows in it, and as the horse pulled it along, it would gouge the ice down to about 1 foot thick. Well, you could either saw it, or at that point, if the ice was good, that's all you have to do is saw it one way and then break it off. So this is a good demonstration of how ice works, and if you do it smartly, you'll see right now there should be a good demonstration here. Hopefully it's demonstrated. See right now it just didn't quite work right. I think what the problem there was is he wasn't into the good ice enough. This other person might work better here, because looks like he's into the ice. If you go into the clean ice a little farther, it usually breaks off better. So we'll see how successful he is here. But it has a lot to do with how the ice is formed. Believe it or not, the ice forms different every year, depending on the conditions. Yes, for some reason it's not working that well this year. But in the end, if you come out and participate, we can always give you something to find something to do. And now, at this point, they're going to be loading the ice onto the truck for transportation to the Wakely Ice House. So it slid up on a ramp. A couple people guide it. And there you are. All set to get stored in the ice house, covered with sawdust and used during the summer. Each block is, what we tried to do is get a block that's about 12, 14 inches each way. And here you see, like we talked about before, this hole gets fairly large. So it definitely needs protection. And also you can see the man using the pole spike, and that's used to push the blocks around in the water so we can pick them. And here's a truck going off to Wakely, so you'll see that truck at Wakely quite soon in the next video, and we'll unload the ice in the ice house. We have arrived at the ice house. The truck is backed up, and there's a plank that goes from the bed of the truck into the ice house window. And the other opening you see in the ice house is the ice house door. That's the door we use to take the ice out in the summertime. And it's the door we use to get in and out all the time during positioning of the ice. The ice house is made of wood. The two outside walls have a double wall. They have an outside wall and an inside wall with sawdust that stays in there year-round. The two interior walls are basically wood walls, and they are just a barrier to hold the sawdust. Right now you'll see that the ice house is completely emptied of sawdust, mainly because you want to get it as clean as possible so you have fresh sawdust every year, so it doesn't get wet and soggy, and then you lose your insulation value. So right now it's just before we're getting ready to put some sawdust. There you can see also a picture of the ice saw, of the ice plow that I talked about before. If you just look right below Jim's foot there. And so this is just before, those are pictures of the ice tongs. We have a number of ice tongs that people have generously donated to the site. We are very proud of our collection of ice tongs and saws, and very thankful for people that have donated. Now begins the process of moving the sawdust into the ice house. At this point, we just use some boxes because we don't need that much volume. We are in the process of making a base for the first few blocks of ice. It's so very important to get this base level and solid, because as you'll see in the continuing video, this ice will be approximately 5 foot high, and we'll be walking around the ice with just enough room for a body to go through, because we want as much ice in there as possible, and we can't really start putting the sawdust around the ice until we're out of there, because if you start walking down the sawdust, it will not insulate as well as just when it's loose. So you have to build this huge block of ice in there without it falling on you. In bigger ice houses, they have larger outside walls where there are approximately 2 to 3 feet of insulation of room to put sawdust. I know for a fact that there used to be an ice house in Stevens Point that was owned by the railroad. Right now you'll see the first few blocks going into the ice house, and we're beginning to start. We're going to reject a few of those there because we have to have really good blocks to start with. We want a really good base. So some of those might be rejected. We may not use all of them. And you might see that in the future where some of them will be stacked outside. We'll use them probably on top, because at that point, as long as they're up there. But anyway, getting back to some other constructions of ice houses. When it was in its heyday, they had huge ice houses like the one in Point, where there was a 3-foot gap between the outside wall and the inside wall, and that was filled with sawdust. And you can imagine the amount of sawdust that would take. So it really saved a lot of time and labor to have the sawdust there permanently. Right now you'll see that we have the first layer of ice established. It probably took us a good half hour to get those ice chunks worked in there. And now we're filling any kind of gaps, because obviously you can't get these blocks perfect, but it's very important to have them so they don't move. And part of that, and also so there's insulation between the ice, and you can when you remove them in the summer, a little bit of sawdust between them helps them so they don't freeze together. We have had some instances where these blocks have frozen together, and then you had to go break them apart. So it's a good thing to have some sawdust in between them, and so it serves two purposes. Purpose is to keep them separated, and also to fill any gaps, so the base is more solid. And then we put a layer on top. before the next row of ice. Also, again, for two purposes: to level things out, and also to give us some insulation value between them, so they separate in the summer. It's a little time consuming at this point, but it's very important to get a good start. And at this point, we'd like to thank Golden Eagle Log Homes for providing this sawdust for us. That's very important. If without someone to get sawdust from, good dry sawdust, it's very important that the sawdust be dry. So it's very important that we have some place to acquire good dry sawdust. So we're very thankful to have Golden Eagle Log Homes supply that for us. And you can see we just have enough room just to get around there. But it's more than it's about 1.5 feet of sawdust that will go around. We try for about 1.5 feet of sawdust around the ice, and about 2 to 2.5 feet of sawdust above the ice. Here you see where the pile is almost all complete, and you can see that there's a wood member across the top of the ice house, which is about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet below the top of the ice. Now, when we put sawdust in there, the sawdust will go all the way to the top of that ice house. But you can see Jim is a good 6 foot high, and the ice is right to almost to the top of his head. So there's a lot of ice there. And here you'll see the different layers. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's approximately 5.5 foot high. And then you'll see in the background some of those odd chunks. We put them on top. So we made use of all the ice that was brought to us. And now you'll see the process of starting to move the sawdust in a more productive manner, because we used to do it with boxes. It would take probably a day and a half with boxes to put the sawdust in the box and use ladders to take it up to the top. It was a very time-consuming process. About 3 years ago, we received a donation from Family Natural Foods of an old grain auger. I don't know if you know the history of Family Foods, but it used to be also a feed store when Mike's father owned it. So this little grain elevator auger was donated from Family Foods to Wakely to help us with moving the sawdust, and it's been a great labor saver, and also it saves on our lungs too, because you can imagine as you're bringing a box of sawdust and dumping it up there. I mean, you see that there is quite a bit of sawdust or dust flying, but not anywhere near when you would take a box of sawdust up there and dump it into there, and dust would fly everywhere. We do use dust masks, but it only protects us to a certain amount. Here you can see where the sawdust is. We try to get it as far as we can. You can see that we use different boards and things to deflect the sawdust over in the corners. It is rather difficult in their tight spot to get the sawdust where it belongs. You can see the sawdust falling into the ice house, and we try to just get the sawdust to fall on top of the ice pile, and then we push it around to the sides. And those openings will be filled with boards, and there'll be sawdust right to the top of the ice. And you can see that there are wedges in the ice too to keep them solid. ...2018 ice harvesting at Historic Point, Bass. We would like to invite everyone to come to our ice harvesting in the future. There are many things to do. We have activities that that young people can get involved in sawing ice and also in helping. And we'd also like to thank all the people that have contributed throughout the year to taking care of the saws, to providing sawdust, and to donating all the equipment that goes into the historic ice cutting. We thank you for your help.